A massive tuning list just dropped into the game, and no healer is safe. Let's blast through this list, and let's start off with Resto Druid. Grove Hero Talent Tree, which did see buffs recently, so they're just dialing it back a bit. Harmony of the Grove, for each Grove Guardian that you have out, you would get 6% bonus healing. You know, you can stack these up during your ramps or just use them for moderate throughput. Now they're dialing it back down to 5%. This is very much needed in my opinion. It's not that bad of a nerf, but it's still better than the old 3%. Cenarius's Might increases your haste by 12%. It was 10%. So this is whenever you swift mend, which you're doing all the time in Mythic Plus, for spot healing, for shock healing, and also you can use this to like kind of capitalize your ramp or start your ramp in a raid environment to just gain massive chunks of haste. So a nice compensation buff there. Moving on to the just restoration, like base restoration changes, Convoke the Spirits now casts an additional 4 spells over its duration. I mean, that is insane. I love this. I'm a huge Convoke fan. I played back in Night Fae. So, yeah, massive change. And this is to make it more competitive with Incarn, because how Incarn's working with Grove Guardians is you can really cycle the cooldown of your Grove Guardians, and you just spawn additional Grove Guardians in your Incarn. So it is making this more competitive. Huge buff, in my opinion. I hope it makes Convoke more viable. Embrace the Dream, which buffs your wild growth. Every time you wild growth, it'll just proc a heal on people with rejuve and regrowth. This is getting a buff by 50%. They're also buffing another wild growth centric talent. Power of the Archdruid now has a 60% chance to activate. It was a 40% chance. So after you wild growth, your next regrowth or rejuve has a chance to just proc twice more on 2 additional targets. Very nice changes there to wild growth, because you're in a regrowth, rejuve spammy world. Some people weren't even pressing wild growth that often or not on cooldown in raid. That just doesn't make sense. They're trying to bring a little bit of power back and make some talents more competitive in that sense. Regenesis now increased the healing of rejuve by up to 30% instead of up to 20%, depending on how many points you put into it. This is very good because, once again, they're pressing regrowth a lot now, and I think they want to kind of draw them back into being a rejuve spammy healer in raid, and going back to making more talents more competitive, like Convoke the Spirits. Another way to buff Convoke the Spirits is to kind of dial back Tree of Life a bit, because once again, there's just so much Grove Guardian synergy. Tree of Life now increases the healing done by 10% instead of 15%, and increases the healing of rejuve by 40%. It was 50%. So taking some power away from the rejuve bonuses of Tree of Life, adding them to other talents like Regenesis, makes good sense, because Tree of Life is like a shoe-in for both forms of content. Nourish healing increased by 100%. That's a meme. Who in today's day is going to be taking Nourish over Grove Guardians? I don't know, but maybe this will incentivize you further. Flourish's duration is now 8 seconds instead of 6 seconds. I absolutely love this, extending your ramp by 2 additional seconds. This spell is already super powerful for them. I'm glad to see even more of its power being restored after all the nerfs in Dragonflight. Now onto the damage nerfs. Rip, Rake, Shred, Ferocious Bite, and Sunfire all reduce damage by 15%. Very much needed nerfs. I would actually like to see some of these spells see the nerfs and then like maybe keep Sunfire's damage high. That'd be pretty nice, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. But their damage was insane. A lot of the discussion around Resto Druid isn't around their healing power level, it's about their damage power level, and they're just dialing that back. I think most of the discussion around healers should be around their healing. So there's a pretty good changes, although I can see some people being very upset, and I am sorry. I don't want them to nerf your class. I just think, let's be realistic, their damage was insane, so these are much needed changes. Also fixed an issue that caused mastery, their mastery to gain an additional stack on all targets. So if you're seeing a lot of super mastery cranky builds, you're probably going to see that dialed back a tad, but probably not much. Their mastery is already a very potent stat. So fixing an issue is fixing an issue. Moving on to Evoker, and we are going to talk a little bit about augmentation, but not that much, I promise. So let's talk about their Flame Shaper, the Preservation Flame Shaper changes. Consume Flame will no longer consider increased healing taken modifiers on the target that you engulf when calculating its healing total amount. There were a lot of logs for Evoker that were just popping off and healing for raid, and some of those logs were using a Verdant Embrace to life bind yourself and then commune, what's it called? Oh goodness, Emerald Communion. They were using that ramp still, but a lot of healers were just doing that same ramp where you'd life bind with everyone and then doing a giant dream breath with all of the like deep breath talents for flame shaper and stuff. However, there were a couple logs that looked absolutely disgusting because what they were doing is they were doing all of that. They were life binding onto people, and then they were waiting until like a holy priest popped their divine hymn. And then they were consuming the flames with engulf and using all of the life binded consume flames like to collapse all of those massive hots. So they're really scaling that back with this change because I think this just incentivizes kind of like what feels like an abuse. It was like insane how much healing you can get by boosting all of your dream breaths by a lot and then collapsing 4 seconds of all of those healing into just massive explosive healing. Look, I know this nerf is going to be pretty big for like for some pretty organized groups, but in reality, being able to like stasis and engulf and being able to like life bind all of this healing is still very powerful. They're just kind of dialing it back and just making it not work off modifiers to get out of hand. So a pretty much needed nerf. Also, their throughput is still through the roof regardless of what build you go. There's like 5 different builds for evokers right now. So it's great that they aren't seeing any other nerfs. It's great that they're kind of just seeing what seems like it works as a bug abuse or a bug fix, but it's not. It's one of those things. So nice, good. Okay, they could have done a lot worse. And then we move on to augmentation. I'm only going to talk about this for a second, but Ebon Might only increases the primary stat by 5% instead of 6%. It's a small nerf to Ebon Might, small quote. But if you think about like augmentation's presence in Mythic Plus groups, I talked about this a lot in my last video. The popularity of augmentation, whether you like to admit it or not, does affect the popularity of preservation. And having Ebon Might be reduced means that tanks are going to be less reliant on augmentation. They probably still will be, don't get me wrong, but tanks aren't going to require Ebon Might to survive certain pools more. So that does kind of open the door a little bit. It might crack the door a little bit more open for preservation evokers. So pretty good change there. Pretty good change for the game overall, in my opinion. But let's go ahead and move on to Monk. So with Mistweaver, we're going to talk about Conduit of the Celestials, and they did see a couple like baseline changes, but they are nerfing Conduit of the Celestials again. I would really like to see them just buff Master of Harmony. I mean, yes, the reason why Conduit of Celestials is a shoe-in is half because it's so strong, but also half because Master of Harmony is just undertuned and buggy right now. So I would like to see some of those things get fixed first. Let's just dive in. So Celestial Conduit, the whole sick talent that Conduit of the Celestials plays with is nerfed by 8% to the healing again. So they did reduce the damage in the last tuning phase, but now they're reducing the healing by 8%. I don't know. I don't think it was that warranted. But it's a powerful button. It's not like crazy strong. It's just one of the stronger new buttons that some of the healers have. So beggars once again cannot be choosers. But then Inner Compass now increases secondary stats by 2% instead of 3%. Inner Compass was very good in rating. It was just giving a lot of bonus stats because you're always cycling between these Celestials, and you're obviously not taking August Dynasty in a rating environment unless you're going with like a Jadefire Stomp build, obviously. But yeah, you're just getting free bonus stats, so dialing that back a bit more does reduce some of the power of this hero talent tree a bit. I don't know. I don't like this change either, but I don't know. This one hurts, but it's not the end of the world. It's still a pretty strong. I mean, you're getting 2% of a stat at all points in time, which is pretty good in my opinion. Still pretty good. Now, Temple Training increases the healing of Vivify and Enveloping Mist by 6%, not 10%. So this one is going to be actually pretty rough for us because how it works is our tier set is buffing the healing of Enveloping Mist by 10%, and this is buffing our healing of Enveloping Mist by 10%. So if you have your tier set equipped and you have Temple Training talented, at the moment this was technically buffing our Enveloping Mist by 11% because it's multiplicative on top of our tier set. So dialing this back a bit hurts a lot, especially in a world where still, even after the Tear of Mourning nerfs going from 20% to 12%, we're still spamming around enveloping mists throughout the raid, just getting a ton of healing from Tear of Mourning. So dialing back enveloping mist even more is their goal, I would assume, from these changes. But having Vivify also be cleaved by that means that enveloping mist spamming might still be the play, even though you'll see later on they're going to try to tune this back. But Temple Training was an incredibly bloated hero talent. You know, all of these like passive buffs are supposed to be small, but giving us a 10% healing bonus to a spell that we are spamming in raid basically this converted to a lot of throughput. So although I hate to see it get nerfed, I fully understand it. If you look at any Mistweaver log in the beta, they are spamming Enveloping Mist and getting a ton of healing from things like Tear of Mourning and just flat out Enveloping Mist. So yeah, hate to say it, but very warranted. Let's move on to the Mistweaver talents though. So Yu'lon's Whisper healing increased by 30%. Yes, sir. So Yu'lon's Whisper, while you're channeling your Manatee, you're just breathing out healing. So it's basically free healing, especially because you sit there and spam your Manatee or like sip it every few seconds or sip it for a long period of time, you know? So just having it do more passive healing is nice. It's nice, but you're not going to use this as a cooldown. It doesn't do that much healing. It barely ticks even. So that's why it's seeing a nerf or a buff. Very warranted in my opinion. But the best change is to Jade Bond. So as you know, Jade Bond shares a node with the talent that makes your Celestial a 1 minute cooldown as opposed to a 3. But recently, they've done a lot of changes to your Mastery, which is what you're supposed to play Jade Bond with. A Mastery build, proc a bunch of Mastery procs that are more powerful thanks to Jade Bond, and then reduce the cooldown of your Celestial. Not necessarily to a minute, but you're supposed to get it down to a reasonable level, like 2 minutes, a minute and a half, minute 45. However, a lot of these buffs have come from the removal of Essence Font, and the removal of Essence Font was an inherent nerf to Jade Bond because it was how it works is every time you proc your mastery, you're just taking a second off of Chi by 0.3 seconds. But if you had Essence Font on the target that your mastery was going to hit, you would then get 2 procs of it, then getting 0.6 seconds removed in total. But now that Essence Font's removed, you're not getting as thanks to things like Crane style, you're getting more mastery procs, but you're not getting more events of Jade Bond, the mana reduction or the cooldown reduction. So buffing it up to 0.5 seconds is just like a compensation buff thanks to the removal of Essence Font. So very much needed. I tried this out in Mythic Plus thinking, oh, we're kicking up more mastery, this is going to be good. But then I very quickly realized that, oh yeah, Essence Font's gone, so you can't like get double the effect of this, so you're just not reducing the cooldown by a lot. Very good change. Also, just adding it on, this will increase the healing of Yu'lon's Soothing Breath by 500% instead of 300%. That's a pretty cranky buff, but I can't see it being better, being a better healing profile, even if it does like burst it up to like Giga Heal. I don't see it being a better healing profile than a 1 minute Yu'lon ramp. That is just too desirable. But moving on to Tear of Mourning getting another nerf. Tear of Mourning now increases the healing of Vivify by 10%, was 15%. So Tear of Mourning buffs like the cleave healing of your Vivifies. Once again, we're still just enveloping mist spamming for a bit more healing than Vivify. So I don't really know. I really don't know why they're why they're nerfing the specific to Vivify modifier here. So that is a question mark. I don't know. Maybe they want us to enveloping mist spam. I could not tell you, but the locations of invigorating mist and healing elixir have swapped. This one is kind of a question mark to me, but I guess it's just so that if you don't want healing elixir, you're not forced into it, so you can kind of path around it, which is cool, I guess. There might be some scenarios where you just don't want healing elixir. I don't know what those would be, but I'm sure they would come up. So that's honestly just a nice quality of life that doesn't cost anything, but is nice. I guess it's there. Moving on to Holy Paladin, they have a long list, so let's just dive right in. Be careful, these Herald of the Sun changes only affect Retribution. So coming down to Lightsmith, they did see a change. Blessed Assurance now increases the damage of your next Crusader Strike by 20% instead of 100%. Now, this is whenever you cast a Holy Power Spender, your next Crusader Strike is just buffed. This might seem like a question mark, but you can weave Spenders in between your Crusader Strikes, and you will see in a second that they are actually moving some of the power from this talent and buffing your Crusader Strike to just basically baseline Crusader Strike. So it's honestly it's just a compensation thing for things to come. Now, Righteous Judgment now has a 50% chance to create a concentration instead of a 30%. This is nice. We'll buff their damage by a good bit. Blessing of Dawn now increases the damage and healing of Holy Power Spenders by 5% per stack. Was 20%. You know, this is pretty warranted since they're trying to add a lot of baseline power to things like Word of Glory and Light of Dawn. So this is just basically making it less bursty if you stack this up a bunch by casting like Crusader Strikes and Judgments and Holy Shocks and stuff, and then just cash it all in on a big boosted like Word of Glory or Light of Dawn. But it's just they are adding a lot of power once again into the baseline of those spells. Fading Light and Seal of Order now increase Blessing of Dawn's effect by an additional 5%. It was 10%, so a nerf there. Once again, trying to reduce that effect of storing up those your spenders and just incentivizing you to cast them because they are getting buffed. Light of Dawn, Word of Glory are seeing a further 15% increase. Yeah, they've been nerfing Word of Glory by a bit recently, but they're just adding more power to that baseline. Very nice, very good change. Hammer of Wrath's damage is increased by 50%, but its cooldown is increased by 15%. This is a pretty big nerf because Hammer of Wrath, you can cast it for free when you're in your cooldown or basically like use it without being in execute threshold. So this is nerfing how often you can do that because of how often you can proc like your wings and stuff. However, it's really not the end of the world. Now, Awakening now requires 15 stacks to activate. It was 12, and it increased the damage of Judgment by 40% instead of 30%. So your Judgment's going to hit a little bit harder. Oh man, where is this thing? But you're gonna proc your Avenging Crusader, Avenging Wrath a little bit less often because that plays very well with Herald of the Sun because you do go into Sun's avatar whenever you get those Awakening procs. So that is just kind of scaling back how often you can be in your cooldown and procking Sun's avatar. Now, Tears of Deliverance has kind of fallen to the wayside because of all the other buffs and changes to Holy Paladin. However, it's seeing a little bit more of a buff. Its healing is increased by 30%, and it increases healing take by 12% instead of 10%, which Tears of Deliverance honestly is a pretty solid cooldown, and especially in a Mythic Plus environment, even in a raid environment, in a Holy Shock world. I mean, you're just playing into your Tears of Deliverance anyways. So a pretty good change there. I'm glad they're kind of realizing that this has just fallen down in terms of power and buffing it back up to at least relevancy. So Crusaders might now reduce the cooldown of Judgment and Holy Shock by 2 seconds. It was 1.5 seconds. This did see a nerf a while back when they were trying to scale back how many different ways you can reduce your Holy Shock's cooldown. So this Crusader's Might is one of the cooler ways, in my opinion, to reduce your Holy Shock's cooldown. So I'm glad to see that it's seeing a little tiny buff. Pretty good there. Sanctified Wrath now decreased the cooldown of Holy Shock by 50% for its duration, was 20%. This is getting a very similar treatment to like Convoke versus Tree or Incarn, where they're trying to make something like Sanctified Wrath a little bit more enticing. And Awakening, like I said, it does work very well with Herald of the Sun. So they're just trying to further incentivize you to kind of go away from that. So also just making this a more competitive talent. So you'll get a lot more Holy Shocks in your Avenging Wrath. Overflowing Light now converts 30% of Holy Shock's healing into an Absorb Shield, was 15%. This is one of those things that got nerfed to the ground and back over time, over a long period of time. So it's nice to see that you're just going to see a little bit more shields stored up from your Holy Shocks. Now, once again, with the Crusader Strike tuning, Holy Infusion, if you use your Holy Infusion procs on Crusader Strikes, you're going to get 50% bonus damage instead of 25%. This is what I mean by they're trying to buff like baseline Crusader Strike, because imagine if they buffed this to 50%, they kept other changes up to 100%. No, they're just scaling it back because they do stack these buffs that you can stack on top of each other. The damage bonuses do stack on top of each other. And then once again, Crusader Strike damage is increased baseline by 25%. Excellent change there, if you ask me. Now, Moment of Compassion now increased the healing of Flash of Light by 50%. It was 15%. Flash of Light has kind of fallen from grace. And this can also buff your tank healing and incentivize you to keep like a beacon on your tank, which is just a very solid change there. I mean, imagine a 50% boosted Flash of Light on your beacon tank. That is very good. Saved by the Light now activates when an ally drops below 50%, was 30%. Now that means that this is going to proc a lot more often. This also can incentivize you to keep your beacon on your tank instead of your DPS. Yeah, like I said, this is going to proc way more often, because think of how many times you fall below 50% health versus how much you fall below 30% health. So just a huge buff, in my opinion. It's not going to proc more often to the point where it's going to get annoying and you wish that it only procced at 30%. But having it at least get full value across a dungeon, it's going to proc more times. So like it probably like around once a minute as opposed to like once every 2 minutes maybe, you know, so you're going to see a lot more procs. That is a good thing. Moving on though, Blessing of Summer now transfers 12% of healing into damage, was 20%, and transfers 12% of damage into healing, was 10%. So you're going to get a bit more healing out of Blessing of Summer, but a lot less damage, which is very warranted because this does scale off of whoever you put it on. So this was just a lot of free bonus damage, and then you stack it with things like Lightsmith's Sacred Weapon. It's just a ton of free damage that you're kind of not really doing much for. They're also buffing Shield of the Righteous damage by 25%. That's very good, because whenever you're full stacked on Holy Power in a Mythic Plus environment, you do press this quite often for just good AoE damage, so buffing that damage is good. Power of the Silver Hand is seeing a few changes too. So Power of the Silver Hand now increases the healing of your next Holy Shock by 20% of all damage and effective healing done, was 10%. So whenever you cast like a Judgment, a Flash of Light, or a Holy Light, over the next 10 seconds, you're just storing up healing for your next Holy Shock to do big healing. This is a pretty good change overall. I mean, it's right in the dead center of your hero talent tree, so a pretty good buff in my opinion. But the weird thing is that Power of the Silver Hand has moved to the final gate. Now I don't know what that means, but I would assume that means, like, you know how you have to spend a certain amount of talent points to unlock the next row. I think it means that it's moving there, but correct me if I'm wrong. I've never heard that terminology in my life before. But moving on, Empyrean Hammer and Inflorescence of the Sunwell are no longer on a choice node with each other. This is very good for, did it say Empyrean Hammer? Isn't it Empyrean Legacy? Anyways, this is very good for Empyrean Hammer because both of these talents are very sick and very strong. So now you can go both of them at the same time. So very cool there. Really good changes all around for Holy Paladin, shifting a lot of the power to be more baseline instead of like proc heavy, while also moving it to less relevant procs. In my opinion, some very solid Paladin changes all around. But let's get to another long list, and that is priests. Starting off with the baseline priest changes, healing done from Void Shift to the priest is now capped at twice the priest's health. I'm not going to begin to act like I understand why this change was warranted. I know that there's a lot of changes that are scaled off of health that have been coming, so this might be one of those, but this is just such a weird ability, and I don't main priest, so maybe you guys can help me figure out why that change was warranted. From Darkness Comes Light now increase the healing of your next flash heal by 1%, and that can stack up to 20 times instead of 50 times. So this talent is very weird, especially for holy priests. So from Darkness Comes Light, let's see if I can find it. Yes, okay, so each time your dot damages, it's going to stack up healing of your next flash heal. Now, for Holy Priest, you're spamming flash heal, or at least in the current build, you're kind of casting flash build or flash heal a lot, so you're not really getting that full value from this. You can never stack it up to 50 times anyways, so that is an excellent change for Holy Priest, because now you're just going to get more value for less stacks, and you don't have to sit there for a long time to get full value from this. But like I said, it's just a great change for Disc Priest as well, because you don't have to sit there and let 50 ticks go in, so that you can get like 50 stacks. You just have to wait for 20 stacks. So great change all around, just shrinking a pretty weird talent there. Cauterizing Shadows healing now is increased by 60%. So whenever your Shadow Word Pain expires or is refreshed with less than 5 seconds remaining, so in that pandemic window, a nearby ally is healed for a chunk of your spell power. This is a pretty good change, and Cauterizing Shadows is a talent that encourages good play, just maintaining your dots. So I like that, and the healing value getting buffed. Resolved a bunch of issues, so Holy Nova wasn't benefiting from the extended range of Phantom Reach, wherever it is, Phantom Reach here. Also, Halo was pulling an entire dungeon. If you cast Halo and Necrotic Wake, you're just killing everyone. So it's good. That's just a bug that we all knew was coming to be fixed. It won't pull people that are out of combat now, hopefully. Updated the visuals and animations for Void Shift. Fixed an issue causing Divine Image to not teleport whenever you like gate, I guess, or to fail on transports. The following talents are also now 1 point. This change is actually pretty nice. Manipulation and Surge of Light. So this will just give you a bit more room to wiggle at the bottom of your talent tree. So very nice change there. Also Manipulation being a 1 point talent there. So that is probably the best of all of these changes, but these changes are very nice. I really like this From Darkness Comes Light change, admittedly. But let's move on to their hero talent trees. So Archon, the Holy and Shadow tree, is seeing some changes, but be careful because those are to Shadow Priest. But moving on to Oracle, everyone's favorite hero talent tree, right? They fixed 2 issues. Energy Cycle will benefit from Apotheosis as intended, and also Premonition of Insight won't consume multiple stacks when you're dispelling multiple debuffs. A very funny bug in my opinion, but that's good. So you're not going to waste all 3 stacks on one dispel. Moving on to just the discipline changes in this Oracle Holy Tree. Resolved an issue causing Preemptive Care to increase the duration of your atonements for longer than intended. I know, God forbid you guys have longer atonements. Look, I get that it's an issue, but why not just like bump it up to what it was accidentally doing instead of bumping it down to what it's intended to do? You know what I mean? Like, but yeah, this was an issue, so they fixed it. Very good. Preemptive measure or preventative measures now increases penance, smite, and holy nova damage by 40%. Was 25%. And then let's really quickly talk about the holy change. So preventative measures also increases smite, holy fire, and holy nova damage by 25%. So just seeing a nice damage buff to the Oracle Holy talent tree. This is also really cool and worth noting that if you let your what's it called, a Rhapsody stack up, then you're getting a nice juicy Holy Nova with this talent tree. So pretty nice buffs there. As far as Void Weaver goes, be careful, that's a change to Shadow Priest. But let's move on to Discipline Priest. So all damage is increased by 5%. That scales pretty nicely with things that are also seeing buffs like preventative measures. Holy Nova's healing is increased, so incentivizing Disc Priest to kind of use this when stacked on an ally for nice juicy healing. Once again, this stacks up with Rhapsody. So very cool change there. I like that they're putting more emphasis on Holy Nova, making it more relevant once again. Power Word Shield's absorption is increased by 30%. This is a massive change. You're using this on tank almost on cooldown right now, so adding more effective health to them every few seconds. Very nice. Also, this is worth noting that this does technically buff your Rapture windows very nicely, so that's worth noting. And then also Power Word Radiance cooldown is reduced to 18 seconds. You know, I did notice whenever I played Disc Priest that I was having to spam like renews around or flash heals around to reapply my atonements a bit more often, and it did feel like Radiance needed a cooldown reduction, so that is amazing. Shaving 2 seconds off of it isn't going to break the game, but this does a good bit of healing in both like Raid and Mythic Plus, and it's just like it's your enabler. Like you kind of need this to go off and do your thing. So very, very nice change. I'm glad that they did that there. Bright Pupil now reduces the cooldown of Power Word Radiance by 3 seconds. Was 5 seconds. This is just kind of compensating for the baseline shift. So they're shifting more of that cooldown reduction into the baseline of Radiance and taking it out from things like Bright Pupil talents, which is very good. Abyssal Reverie now increases atonement's healing from shadow spells by 5 to 10%. Was 10 to 20%. I believe that they're doing a change like this to Abyssal Reverie because the discussion for Disc Priest is basically you just take Void Weaver because it encourages shadow damage and does a lot of shadow damage. You're just getting more value out of talents like Abyssal Reverie. So by nerfing Abyssal Reverie instead of just nerfing flat out Atonement, you're then, secondhand shifting some of the power into Oracle, maybe making it more of a discussion on what to take there. So that nerf, I don't think it was needed, but I do think it is a clever way to nerf like something in Disc Priest tree. But then they fixed an issue causing Indemnity not to increase the atonement's duration by its intended amount. So that is a good way to fix a random bug in atonement's duration, and then fix an issue where atonement healing was only being increased by 50% outside raid instead of the intended 70%. So you should be seeing a bit more Mythic Plus healing, the intended amount of Mythic Plus healing. Very nice there. And finally, the Contrition and Heaven's Wrath are moving to 1 point instead of 2 points. So Contrition, when you heal with Penance, everyone with your atonements is healed for an additional amount. You rarely, well, I guess I shouldn't say rarely, especially now, you don't often use your penance for healing. You use it for damage and get atonement healing that way. But this is just and further going to incentivize you to do that, since it's just a one talent node, to like penance your tank, for example, for tank spot healing. And then also reducing Heaven's Wrath down to a one talent node is very good, because Ultimate Penitence is a sick ability, and encouraging you to take this little talent path is just a good way, a good thing for them. Moving on to Holy Priest, all damage is increased by 10%. Whoa, holy damage is kind of crazy right now. But that's like in a vacuum. I think Holy Priests are kind of in a spot right now where a lot of your globals are spent on healing, a lot more than you would probably like. So yes, they do have high damage potential on like target dummies. In practice, you're getting a lot less damage than you would like. So this is honestly probably warranted. I would have liked to seen, as a healer, I would like to see their healing get buffed, so that they have to spend less time healing and then can spend more time damaging instead of doing more damage. But a very nice buff, and stack that on top of all the Holy Nova buffs in your Oracle talent tree. Very cool. Prayer of Healing and Circle of Healing, healing is increased by 30%. Both of these being your like 5-man healing spells and not really being cast in 5-man environments is just weird, especially because you're going to see they're going to buff a lot of things to do with flash heal, and they already have. I've already talked about some of them. So just further incentivizing you to play around these two buttons, or even just take these two talents, is nice. Also, Revitalizing Prayers is very strong in a raid environment, especially with all the ways that you can like extend your renews duration with hero talent trees. So it's nice to see them put more power back in these. I don't know if this is going to encourage you to just spam Prayer of Healing in raid like you did. What season was it of Dragonflight? Season 2, I think. Maybe I'm wrong there, but pretty cool change. I think both of these are cool spells, and I don't like like builds that don't even take them. I think that's weird. So very nice there. Healing Chorus now increase the healing done by Circle of Healing by 3%, was 5%. This is another one of those changes that's adding power to baseline of spells, but shifting power out of talents that buff their healing. Very nice there. Lightweaver, probably my second favorite Holy Priest talent, now increases your heal by 25%, was 15%, which can stack up twice. So you cast 2 flash heals, and then a heal. That next heal is going to be doing 50% bonus healing. Very cool. I love Lightweaver. It reminds me of like old Shadowlands days. And then Trail of Light is now a 1-point talent. This actually is my favorite Holy Priest talent. In a world where you're going to be casting flash heals a lot, like into your tank, now you're incentivized to like cast them around. You can cast it on DPS, then onto your tank, and your DPS will get a little bit of healing there. So very cool. It's going to be a 1-point talent node. Just saving a lot of the power for other parts of your talent tree. All in all, I think excellent buffs to both priest specs, which both were very warranted. I like that they're taking a look at Oracle Priest especially. So very good changes all around there. Also, Halo being fixed, just thank God, because that was so obnoxious in Mythic Plus. But let's move on to the final healer, Shaman. Shaman has been looking very good. So you're going to see some nerfs, but also some shifts of power, which are very good. They have a couple of like quality of life bug fixes basically here. I'm also changing sound animation, so I guess that's good for those of you who spam shamans. You're probably going to be less annoyed there. But a pretty important issue. So an issue causing Sky Fury buff to drop off after transferring zones and disconnecting has been resolved. So if you cast this while summoning someone before a dungeon, then walk into the dungeon, you could like lose that buff, have to recast again. Very annoying. You could also forget to just recast it. Or if someone DCs with this buff, they would just lose it, which was very annoying, especially on beta. Come on, those servers are dog. So yeah, very nice changes there. Starting off with the Farseer talents. So Natural Harmony, there are two changes here. Nature Harmony and Natural Harmony, they both mean the same talent, I'm pretty sure. But it now reduces the cooldown of Nature's Guardian by 15 seconds instead of 10 seconds, so a nice little buff there to your survivability. And also it will increase the amount of health that you're getting by 10% instead of just 5%. So Natural Harmony is this one, and it buffs Nature's Guardian, which is just whenever you fall below a certain threshold, you're going to gain a proc heal just to keep you alive. It's like a healing elixir style buff. So pretty good there, in my opinion. They also fixed an issue where your downpours weren't proccing your ancestors to use chain heal. So that's nice. That should add up to a little bit more healing, but you'll see they are nerfing downpour a bit in a second. So restoration, also the final change in Farseer for restoration. Hydro bubble absorption is tripled. It's increased by 200%. That is so sick. So whenever your ancestors go away or like expire, they're gonna cast a hydro bubble, just a nice little shield. They did nerf this a while back, a couple changes ago, but just buffing it up again is nice. So good changes there for Farseer. I don't know if it's gonna like shift the discussion away from totemic, but these are nice. This is some nice changes and incentivizes some good things like survivability. However, Earth Shield is extremely powerful right now, and adding 3 additional charges to it make it last longer, so you don't have to spam it on your tank, and just add more healing to it. So I don't know if you're gonna prefer your like Natural Harmony over Earthen Communion in a Mythic Plus environment, but that is still a very nice change. Good stuff. As far as Totemic Resto Shaman goes, you are seeing some nerfs. Earth Surge now increased healing taken by 15% instead of 10%. Yes, this is a buff, but it's just because I'm pretty sure in almost every scenario you were just taking Totemic Coordination. So there's just buffing one of those talents that's less of a decision to make it more of a decision. But those free chain heals being more powerful is just very solid throughput in both forms of content. Downpour healing is decreased by 20% and mana cost is reduced by 20%. It's weird that they're putting this underneath the totemic tree, so maybe it's just a reduced effect while you're in totemic. I'm not sure, but downpour, you can basically cast your healing rain again to make it do a burst. So weird placement of this nerf there, in my opinion. So the flat changes across the board to restoration, they're receiving a 5% healing reduction across the board. In Mythic Plus, this was a bit more warranted than in Raid healing, but I guess this is just to scale back how strong they've looked, because they have looked very strong. I'm not denying that. But 5% is actually pretty big. Usually you see like 3% nerfs across the board when healers are performing how Restoration's performing right now. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess it's warranted. That's all I have to say about that. Spouting Spirits, though, healing was reduced by 35%. Spouting Spirits was going kind of crazy in Raid. Spirit Link Totem was just like popping off in terms of healing. So seeing a heal reduction to that just makes sense. It's definitely warranted. Ancestral Awakening now heals for 25 to 50% of the amount healed instead of 15 to 30%. This is whenever you spot heal someone, it has a chance, and that chance can crit, by the way, which is a very cool design of a talent of basically proccing on another low ally or another injured ally. So very needed, this talent. I literally can't think of a time where you would take this. And when they're incentivizing more of the spot heal build with like all the healing surge changes and Riptide seeing some buffs and stuff, you are going to be proccing this a lot, so to have it more effective, you're basically just going to be every now and then healing a second ally for half the amount of your heal is just nice. Very good change there. They also fixed some issues that just aren't intended, so very nice there. One thing that I did kind of skim over earlier that I want to come back to, though, is that Cloudburst Totem has been very difficult to test because of some like bugs. So your chain heals from your totemic rebound and totemic shaman were just resetting the amount of value that you have stored up, and then also you just weren't buffing with reactivity your cloudburst healing. So these changes are going to make cloudburst, you're going to see it be tested a lot more, and that is very good. It was just like literally not working, you could not test it. So that is going to wrap up all the changes here. Overall, I think very good, balancing out a lot of the power of the weaker spells or specs and the stronger specs, while also shifting a lot of power out of talents and into baseline of spells. Very good changes there. And this was a very good like upkeep phase for any of my MTG players, but a very good upkeep phase of changes to things like Jade Bond that just aren't behaving as they used to or aren't as powerful as they should be, thanks to changes that are coming in the War Within. So very nice round of tuning in my opinion. I'm excited to see how things kind of balance out right now, and I'll get back to you guys and make more content on that. But let me know what you guys think of these changes. What are you most and least excited about? Are you happy that some of these bugs like the Halo, the Cloudburst Totem got fixed? Let me know all of that and more down in the comments below. Also, while you're down there, make sure you like this video if you liked it, if you like these changes, or if you just like having me read through them for you guys. But that's going to do it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, take care.